Good morning, or whatever time it is where you are, Opening Pathway viewers. This is Tom LeNoble. It's great to be with you today, and I'm excited about my guest, John Munsell, the CEO of Bizzuka. Bizzuka, and we're going to learn all about Bizzuka here in a moment. John, welcome to Opening Pathways.
Thanks, Tom. Excited to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
I'm thrilled to have you. I've been looking forward to it. I want to start at the beginning. And I want to know what Bizzuka is and tell us a little bit about you. But I'm really interested in knowing is what sparked your idea to start Bizzuka.
Oh man, that's a that's a loaded question. It's funny because back in the dark ages, I was in financial services and spent about 16 years there. And then this little thing called the web came out. And I was like, oh, this is really fascinating. And at the time, I was working for Northwestern Mutual Life. And so I built an intranet using HTML. And I thought, this is a whole lot of fun. And so our office started to use it. And then I had a friend call me and said, hey, I'm thinking about building a website. I'm like, okay, I'll build it for you. And he said, well, how much? And I told him, and he's like, okay, let's do it. So I built my first website. This is in 96 or 97, I think. And then I realized, well, this is a whole lot more fun than insurance. And so I ejected and started a company that built web applications for people. This is back, before the first line of code was even available, right? There were no clone-ish websites. And then as we started to build that company, another company paid us, I don't know, a little over $1 million to build the equivalent of a content management system for them. And there was no such thing at that time. And so we built that for them and we jointly owned the intellectual property for it. And then in 2001, we flipped this tool into a consumer facing tool. So our clients now could add functionality to their websites by clicking a button. And then we switched our business model from construction to licensing. So we were a SaaS, software as a service, before SaaS was even an acronym.
Wow.
And then we decided to flip that into a company called Bizzuka. And you're probably wondering, how did I come up with that crazy name? Well, my brother and I were talking over the phone, trying to name this new company. And so he was throwing out some names and I was throwing out some names. And then he said something. I thought he said Bizzuka. And I said, Bizzuka, that's kind of cool. We could spell it B-I-Z, kind of a play on business. And, the bazooka itself would be, play on the powerful portable weapon, which is, contracted. I said, that really kind of emulates what we're building here. And he's like, oh, that's a great idea. How'd you come up with that idea? And I said, I thought that's what you said. And he said, no. I said, well, what did you say? He goes, don't even worry about it. Let's call it bazooka.
Let's go with this. Forget what I said.
That was a hoot. And there we are.
That's great. How did you know? Like, what moment was it with Bizzuka that you went, yeah, this is my path. I know this is what I should be doing.
Oh God, me and my wife tells me that's how I was wired, all the time. And I guess I've always had three things rolling around in my head, or as I call, I've always had three propellers spinning on top of my head. And one was technology, because my first job out of college was the year IBM came out with the first PC, and they slapped it on my desk and said, figure out how to use this thing and then teach us, So I was like, well, this is really kind of fun. And then I thought, okay, well, that's really cool. And then I built a spreadsheet that helped the bank analyze commercial financial statements. And about 14 years later, and maybe no, 10, about 7 or 8 years later, we decided to turn that into a product and sell it. And so we sold it via direct mail. That was before email or anything, right? So you had to mail something out and hope a check came back in the mail. And then I learned marketing. So I mean, my minor was marketing, my major was finance, but all of a sudden I got really passionate about copywriting and marketing. So there's the second propeller that's whirring. I'm a technology guy, and and into that. But then the third propeller kicked in, which is entrepreneurship. I like, this is really fun, starting a business from scratch. And there was just something really wild about wrapping up a whole bunch of envelopes, 500 envelopes, slapping stamps on them. This is old fashioned way, mailing them out, and then just waiting. And then in 3 weeks, all of a sudden checks would show up. It was just such an experiment. And, you're just sitting there for 3 weeks going, I wonder if anybody's going to like me. And then, all of a sudden the checks show up. So that was really fun. I just, now all of a sudden, the entrepreneurship kicked in and off we go. And I starting businesses. So,
I love this. So I want to ask you a question. I find when I talk to people that if we look back when you were a young John, someone influenced who you are today. Someone influenced this trajectory of where you've arrived. Who was that for you?
man, that's really hard to say because there are a bunch of people. I would have to say first, my dad told me you don't want to work for somebody, you want to work for yourself. And he worked for a bank all his life, and he ultimately started a bank. That was way after he had told me you need to work for yourself. And then the other, I think, was probably my what I would call my first real boss, which is a guy named Alan Lahr. And that was when I was in the mortgage business. And he just was really an encouraging guy. He encouraged me to innovate. He encouraged me to do things that nobody else in the bank was doing. And he always put me in front of his bosses and said, hey, you need to hear what John's doing, which made him look good. A lot of bosses will say, ooh, I don't want anybody outshining me. But Alan was a kind of guy that said, this guy is really something, and he was one of the few people that understood that he hired me. And by him hiring me, made him look good if he could tell people how good a job he did, right? And so I think his encouragement really got me, I think, thinking about starting businesses and doing that. In fact, that bank was in Baton Rouge, and then I ended up moving to a bank in Clearwater, which is where I built that application that we started to sell. And they called Alan for a reference, and he said, do yourself a favor and hire John. I thought that's a really
That's
sweet
great.
man,
That's
right?
really great. Yes,
Yeah.
you can't ask for a better reference than that.
No,
I've
no.
had a few of those where people call me and I go, you can ask me all these questions. Just let me tell you right up front, hire this person while you can. Just go for it before somebody else grabs them while you and I are talking.
Right.
Yeah. So I wanna talk a little bit, we just went through um we're in a new year, and for me at least, I have a practice that I do as I close out a year and start a new one. And it's a bit of a time of reflection, I think, no matter what we do with it. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, is there a belief about yourself that you feel you've outgrown in the last year?
I think there is something about myself and my thought processes that no longer serves me. And it's that which I'm trying to shed. Okay. And it is it's a large part the ritual imposter syndrome, you know, that has always plagued me. And then there's this other one, and I was literally telling my wife this last night. I'm like, you know, and everybody uses this phrase, if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And I said, I really we have the potential this year to do some incredible things, influence a lot of companies, and make a big impact. But I have to change my thought processes. I have to think bigger, and I'm stuck in the just enough mode, and I have to think in terms of abundance. And so that mindset of okay, we made it this far. Okay, well, we made it that far. Yeah, and then there's never a, okay, can I see myself going 10x instead of 1.1x? You know what I mean? And I think I've always seen myself as just, okay, let's just do incrementally better. This time, I really want to do significantly better because, frankly, we're in a space that there's not a whole lot of time, you know?
Yes,
We're in
yes,
AI. That thing moves faster than
it does. It
anything I've ever seen. So we have to move faster, but we also have to think bigger, way, way bigger.
I'm on this thought process about the imposter syndrome discussion that we've been talking about now for quite a bit, and I'm even hearing young people talk about the imposter syndrome, and um, I, I'm I'm thinking about it because it impacted me greatly. In fact, my book was actually going to be named something with that in it before I derailed it. But as I'm looking at it more, and as I work with people, I'm starting to have this realization that there's a few things in play that get brought into this imposter syndrome. I think one is fear. I
Mhm.
think another one is that we often forget when we're doing something new, the evidence of what we've done, of
There
the
you
things
go.
we've accomplished. We get something new in front of us. And because it's new, it feels whatever we brings up risky, challenging. I'm not going to make it. It can't be big enough. What if I don't have time? Whatever it is, the could have
Mhm.
is of it. And I think sometimes we forget to remember what we've accomplished and to bring that in the equation when we're thinking about it. But that's probably another podcast for us to do another day, which we will talk about. I'm curious, have you had like in this period of this year transition, any has life asked you to slow down recently? And what did you hear when you heard that or not?
Oof. Um, Man, I don't know that life has asked me to slow down so much uh, uh, because I'm not wired to slow down. Um, but I do think that I have, I guess, a greater awareness of this is going to sound really weird. I have uh, um, a greater awareness of my thoughts controlling my outcomes, and I am in control of my thoughts. I am not. I think we're always looking for an excuse for our thoughts, someone to blame for our thoughts. Yet we're the ones who choose those, right? And so, you read psychology books and they want to blame your parents for something, or your surroundings, or your economic status, or anything else. And yet there are plenty of people who go way beyond anybody else. There are always outliers. What I've been doing, I've been just insanely conscious of how I'm thinking of the past, and I'm bringing uh, a regret or a fear or a challenge or an argument or whatever, and I'm bringing it into the present. And I'm now feeling an emotional response to that past event. This is getting really eclectic, sorry.
No, I love it.
Um,
Right up
but
my alley. Go.
okay. But I'm like, and then I catch myself. I'm like, why am I reliving something, telling myself a new story about it, feeling that story, emotionally getting connected to that story, and it's screwing up my future, right? Because now it's got me essentially saying this will happen again, and I'm going to feel this again. And so I've become really aware. Okay, when that happens, I need to shut that off and choose a different story, choose a different focal point. And at the same time, I catch myself forecasting the future based on the negative past, going to what you said, oh, rather than focusing on the accomplishments, we focus on the failures. And so now I would forecast that into the future and go, oh, I'm going to do it all over again, and I get all this. And so when I get into my, prayer state or meditation state, whatever you want to call it, what I'm trying to do is focus on this current millisecond, right? And I'm trying to just block out anything else and just say, look, in this current millisecond, there is no past, there is no future, there's only now. And I can feel peace, I can feel love, I can feel connection, I can feel whatever I need right now if I just eliminate everything else, right? If I look at myself on a timeline and I just say the current present millisecond is all there is. I don't know whether there'll be one after that. And I certainly don't want to bring in anything from the past forward. So I can now be much more selective in what I'm thinking about. And that calms me. I know this is crazy, man. I've never had an interview like this before,
Yeah.
but
I
I'm
love
just telling you
this.
where I'm at.
No, no, John, I love this because you're not only speaking my language, you're speaking about the work that I do. And first, I have to laugh because you talk about being wired not to slow down. Somebody asked me the other day, Tom, don't you think you need some rest? And I laughed at them and said, I am resting. You just wait and see what's going to happen next. But what we're talking about right now is actually a lot about my work and actually the academy for coaching excellence, where I'm the CEO, where we train coaches, which is we work from an ontological model, the study of ontology, like the study of psychology and cosmology and the others. I
Mhm.
encourage viewers to look that up, is about the study of being. And what we're speaking to here is not the psychology of it, what happened in a relationship or when you were five or the last job or whatever, not in the future, but how are you being and how is that helping or not helping you reach your goals and dreams? And
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I find with so many of my clients is this living in what happened. And it fascinates me because it's as if we get to have a do-over, as if we're kind of like our phone when we're watching a video and there's that button that we can go back 10 seconds. That doesn't happen in life. And as I love to say, the magic of life is right here. So we are talking the same language of how we're approaching this. And I love this idea. And just to add to that, I think what we're thinking often becomes our reality. So if we're
Yeah.
thinking,
Completely agree. And
we're introducing that into the space as opposed to
yeah.
thinking that it may just turn out wonderfully.
Well, I can tell you a bunch of stories that'll mess with your mind, but I I know. Okay, so to me, there's hope, there's belief, and then there's knowing. And knowing to me is the strongest because I'll give you for instance, when we moved from Tampa back here to Lafayette. Um, we had a bunch of circumstances. So I was, in yet another startup, right? Essentially, this one rebooting, and so I had no income, had four kids under the ages of five, and we had to find a house, and we just wanted a bigger house, lots of things, but I just kept knowing that there was a house here. This is a crazy story, but I was like, man, I want a house with a really big backyard. And I want a house with a swimming pool because I want my kids to grow up with a swimming pool. I had a friend whose 5-year-old son drowned in the neighbor's pool. And I was like, I'm not going to have that. I'm going to have a pool. I'm going to teach my kids to swim right away. In Tampa, we had a tangelo tree in our backyard that, the kids, we would pick tangelos and they were just delicious, right? So I never even thought about the tangelo tree, but as we were selling our house, I was like, man, I'm going to miss the tangelo tree. So I just had this vision, right, of a house, roughly twice as big as the one we have, huge backyard, blah, blah, blah. And the real estate prices were a lot better here in Lafayette. So we sold our house, and then we had to quickly find a new house. And so we came back here, and we were living with my mother-in-law on in her family room, basically, while we were trying to find a house. And we found one that was the right size but too small of a backyard, and one with the right size backyard but too small of a house. And so the debate was, which one are we going to do? And my wife was like, okay, which one are we going to buy? Which one are we going to buy? And I said, I'll let you know in the morning. And so I went into my focus, and she woke up and she goes, okay, well, which one are we going to buy? And I said, neither. And she's like, neither. I said, I know the house that I have been picturing is here. We just have to find it. And lo and behold, 30 minutes later, we're flipping through the newspaper, and there's a for sale by owner thing. And it was on a street. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to live on that street. But then we were driving to go visit a friend, and she's like, well, we're going to go by here. Why don't we just go look? And so we went down the street, and then she's like, oh, it's, the numbers were going the wrong way. She goes, oh, it's on the other end of this thing. And I didn't realize there was another end, because it dog legs, and then it turns into another, it's a boulevard, but there's a side of the street that's not a boulevard. Who knew? So we drive down there and we look at it, and fast forward, we're like, this is the house. Huge backyard, swimming pool, everything was delightful. And it was great. Made an offer. There are more stories on that I won't tell you about. But the bottom line is, we got the house. We move in February, the beginning of February. Go out to the backyard. What do you think is in the backyard over the fence? A tangelo tree, but it was the neighbor's tangelo tree. But the majority of it was leaning over our fence. We had this strange dog leg thing. So we literally got a full, 2/3 or so, a third, I should say, if not more, of that tangelo tree. And it was in full bloom. So
I love this.
everything was
We definitely are going down a different path than I expected today, but I'm
so much from the AI.
going to run with it for a minute, because what
Yeah.
you're talking to me about is something that I have a lot of belief in and have used in my life, and it gets a lot of attention today. Some of it a bit woo-woo, and some of it
Mhm.
far more complicated than it is, and that is
Mhm.
what is called manifestation,
Yeah.
which to me is envisioning what it is you want and being willing
Mhm.
to let go of timing
Yeah.
and how it exactly looks, and being willing to trust that things will show up. And that's what I believe you did when you're talking about that. And I love that. Tell me,
I'm only scratching the surface on
I
that
know,
one story. There's so much more on that was
yeah,
pure manifestation.
yeah.
It would blow your mind,
Well,
but
John,
it's awesome.
I'm thinking we're going to have a part two of some of the topics that we're not getting into, right? So
Maybe.
tell me this. I want to know what personal values have been part of this for this journey you've been on. What are those personal values you have?
Well, my personal values are the same, what I call leading values for the company, and it's God first, family second, Bizzuka third. And you don't have to believe in God to come work for our company, but I happen to have a deep faith. I don't see how anybody could look at the human body and say it wasn't intelligently designed, especially as you look at the space that I'm in, which is artificial intelligence, and you look at the massive amount of money and the massive amount of space and the massive amount of electricity they're taking to try to emulate what a human brain can do. And there's so much intelligence going into building artificial intelligence. How do you not look at a human and go, yeah, there's this is not just random chance? So I mean, I just happen to have a really strong faith. That's one of my bigger values, and I'm well, man, we're really going down a rabbit hole I wasn't expecting. Uh, I feel like my understanding of what God is has morphed, if you will. I don't. I'm a firm believer in God, but I feel like God is not an individual. It is a collection. It is the collective consciousness of of everything. And we're part of that consciousness. You can read in scripture this basically it saying that. You just have to look at it in a different light. And so I feel like we're part of that collective consciousness. You can't, you start to get into quantum physics and stuff. You really start to go, whoa, okay, this is even more clear what I've been thinking. So anyway, that's I guess that's a big value. I don't know. I like to be treated as I like to treat others,
Yes.
and I want the people around me who work for me, or whether it's my children or whatever, I want them to thrive and to enjoy what they do, but to serve others. Our value statements at the company are learn, teach, grow, serve, innovate, and execute. That we have all six because they essentially tell a story of how we want people to operate. But at the core of everything is service.
Yes.
That's a lot of
You
babbling,
know,
Tom, to answer your
you're
question.
preaching to the choir right now. I don't talk about these things usually, but I'm certainly willing to because they are a huge part of my life. I think, I fall in, I'm going to call it the spiritual bucket in some respects because I can look at a rose and how could that possibly happen? And I could give every example from the goo of the butterfly and that and everything. And I know that I practice at the Unity Church. I'm actually the board chair at my church and have for many, many years, where there is no duality. If we are made in the likeness of God, then we are an expression of God. And that's what is going on here. And it's very inclusive. And I really am less concerned of how people express this belief, this faith, than I am when there's not an acknowledgement of something bigger and greater than we are. Because Lord knows God has many names and many cultures, and they all ultimately are expressing something similarly in different ways. But that similar thing is there's something beyond what we understand. And I think
Yeah.
we only need to look around us to understand that. So tell me this, John. I love this conversation today, by the way. I'm looking forward to us talking more. Um, how has risk changed for you as this trajectory has happened in your life, as your responsibilities have changed, and as you've moved through these changes? How has your relationship with risk changed?
Um, I've always been a risk taker, um, which hasn't necessarily served me well frequently. But but taking risks is how you grow. You have to take risks and take chances to learn and to grow. And at my core, I'm kind of an ADD guy. So I love experimenting and innovating and taking chances. Um, as I started to have children and be responsible, I would say that maybe some of my risk taking pared back a little bit, because children, they're the most incredible blessing and love journey you'll ever go on. And with it comes great responsibility because you never know what you're going to say and will have a massive impact. Even though there are, millions of seconds in the time that you're raising kids, there's that 1 millisecond that'll do something. And to you, it just passed, but to them, it's stuck, and you don't know what that is or what that'll be. So I think sometimes I get overly aware of that aspect of it, and so um, I try not to, do that. But in terms of our risks, Risk is a big category. The risks in what you say, risks in what you do, risks in how you invest, risk in how you run your company. That's a big category. I would say that as I get older, I probably analyze things a little bit more than I used to. I used to just, dive in and go, it's like way back when I was in high school playing football, I used to say, pain is only temporary. I'm going to go after it, and I'm going to just not worry about it. But as I get older, um, I guess the pain probably isn't so temporary.
Yes.
Yeah.
So tell me this, is there a moment you've had that tested your integrity more than your competence?
Um, there are a bunch. I, I, um, I mean, I can give you some examples. Like, and I'd have to stay in the business zone. One of our clients, and this goes back about 10 years, one of our clients noticed a mistake in our billing. And she called it to my attention and she said, "Hey, I think you overbilled us here." And I looked at it, and they're a big company. They were, several $100 million. And I looked at the bill, and sure enough, we had overcharged them about $500. Not a bunch of money. But I started to dig into it, and I realized that that overcharge was a mathematical function of something that we had done incorrectly. And it compounded, and it went back months and months and months. And she only noticed this month. I added it up, and it was about $15,000. All right. Now, we were a small company at the time. I think we only did maybe, I don't know, less than $1 million in revenue. So, maybe we're a little over $1 million in revenue. $15,000 can put a dent in your ability to make payroll, right? At that stage. And so I'm like, no, I take it back. It was $35,000. It was a massive amount of money for where we were. And there's that moment where you go, she didn't notice. She only noticed 500. So you got that voice, you know, in your ear. And as I say, yeah, but I noticed. And so there's that. I either have to live with the fact that I knew and hit it, or I take it and just, say, all right, if I am one with God, what would God do? God would not say, I'm going to hide this.
Yeah.
So I called her up and I said, you know what? You're right. But here's the other thing. I did some analysis, and we actually have been doing this for 27 months or something like that. And we overcharge you about $35,000. And she's like, whoa. I said, yeah. I said, so we got two choices. We could either refund your money and write you a check right now, or we could just give you a credit towards the future work that you'll be doing. And I said, what would you want? She said, let me check. And then she calls back. She goes, we'll just take a credit and we'll let you work it off. I'm like, thank you, God. But that was, on the competence side, that was something that I had let pass, as they were setting up our project management system, you know, and so I felt, okay, well, I should have looked deeper. But on the other end, on the integrity side, I'm like, I can't let this go.
Yes. I love that story because I think doing it from integrity, personally, was not only the right thing to do, you got a good outcome, but everything you did going forward, as you had new people, as you had new clients, that little voice would be there. and in some respect would play into how we operate when those things happen. That was a massive amount of wisdom you just shared here today, John, with our viewers.
Thanks.
Tell me this. I want to know, please, what impact are you most proud of? Not professionally, not publicly, but personally.
What impact? Oh, wow. I think if I were going to be proud of anything, it's that I have um, four really amazing kids, and um, I know everybody's proud of their kids, but mine have made really good decisions, and they've chosen their friends wisely. Um, they have their own unique aptitudes, creative side, focus side, everything. They're all unique, and they have all pursued what was right for them. And and what I've tried to do is not just go like my dad. Well, you really should do this. You should do this. I just said, yeah, if this is what really drives you, man, pursue it with everything you have. And so when I sit back and I watch them, my oldest is 29, my youngest is 24, and that to me is fun, and just to watch it. But it's also, I think one of the other things that I'm proud of is that I have learned at this stage of my life for them, I am no longer their cop or their coach. I'm in a consultant role. And so I just step back and say, look, if you want my advice, you can ask, but I'm not going to give it because that was what happened to me up until my mom was 94. John, you should do this, And I'm like, but I don't want to do that. But I think that's my proudest thing is that I have really great kids, and they've made really good decisions, and they're doing really well.
Tell me this. On this journey, what have you learned about trust?
Wow. I think the main thing is to hire for trust, and that's a really tricky thing to get out of an interview. Um, we I've made some mistakes in hiring, but I'm very my biggest mistake is not firing people when they're not quite working out as well as they are. But I haven't had anybody do something that would really I guess violate the trust thing. But I do know that I like having a business where I don't have to live in fear that somebody behind the scenes is torpedoing something or stealing something or anything like that. And at the same time, going back to the kids analogy, I um, I trust they will learn from their decisions, and that they have made really good ones, and I just am more comfortable with that. But I think a lot of it also is that if you exhibit trustworthiness to others, that comes back to you as well. You attract that which you are. So, that's probably even an even bigger thing.
A whole nother podcast.
Yeah, right.
We're now going to do a series, John.
Right.
Tell me this, please. What does renewal look like for John beyond just rest and time off?
You know, um, I wish I could say that over the last 3 years I've had time for that, and I need to make time for that, but I haven't, because I've been back in startup mode for the last 3.5 years, and I feel like I have to move fast. And so I literally, my wife and I are going to New Orleans here in about 4 hours, and we're going to spend the weekend in New Orleans just goofing around. Oh, you'll get a kick at this. We're going to go see Herb Alpert and the Tijuana
I love it.
Brass.
I love it. I love it.
But it's going to be fun. And so this would be like a step towards renewal. I also every morning I I get up at 5. I do a little workout, take a shower. I go into the family room, fire up my computer. But for about 20 minutes, I kind of go into a meditation and prayer zone where I talk about just focusing on that instant that I'm currently in. And I try to elevate my emotions to, you know, love and excitement and that kind of sets my tone for the day. So that's kind of like my renewal moments. I actually look forward to there because
Yeah.
nobody's awake but me, and it's kind
It's
of
the
cool.
best time of day. I get up early and I just love it. I'm the most creative. Nobody can find me. It's the best. So tell
Yeah,
me this, what does legacy mean to you at this stage of your life?
that's an interesting thing because it messes with my mind a little bit. In other words, a lot of times when people talk about legacy, I think ego kind of gets involved and they want to have a building named after them or something like that. For me, I don't seek fame, notoriety, or even to be remembered. Um, I just want I think what I would like is at my funeral, when people come up to my wife and my kids, I just want some of them to say, your dad changed my life. Your dad did something, and I probably won't even know about it. Hopefully. I think that's the strange thing for me for legacy is I want people to I want to have influenced people in a really positive way, but I don't necessarily seek acknowledgement. Does that make sense? I
Totally.
just I would much rather um, do it. I don't know, anonymously, if you will. I don't really want fame and attention, but I want to have impact.
Yeah, John, I love this. It's been very recent for me to make some peace with this term legacy because I do everything I do because I'm a philanthropist and I've been an anonymous philanthropist for many years until recently as this book came out and I sort of have come out again. And I wrestled with the word legacy. I had people come to me and say, Tom, when I have money, I want to be a philanthropist. And it got me thinking. I now have a keynote. I'm actually doing it on TV and next month, called The Philanthropic Mindset, reminding us that philanthropy is not just about a gala or your name on a building or writing a check. It can be your smile or a
Yeah.
hello. And so I finally came to terms that legacy is not those things for me. For me, it's more about that the things I'm doing and working on and that I'm focused on continue long after I'm gone. That focus and that work somehow continues in some manner, not necessarily about me, but about that work. So I love that there's some similar thoughts there as well. I have one more question for you today.
Go ahead.
If your younger self were watching this podcast that we've just done,
Mhm.
what would you tell him?
Go get a job. No, I'm kidding. uh, um, I think if my younger self were watching it, um, I would probably, that's so hard to say because there's so many things that I regret in life. Um, And there are so many things that I feel like I wouldn't be where I am and who I am if I hadn't have gone through those moments of regret, those bad decisions. So I don't beat myself up for those. I realize they are what shaped me. So I would probably just tell my younger self to pay more attention to who you are and how you impact those that you greet. And I'm still the same. Well, I was a real knucklehead in college. I will apologize to everybody who was in school with me, but but I've always kind of been the same guy, which is I like to make people laugh. And so when I'm at a grocery store and you're checking out and there's a sullen person maybe waiting on you, I make it my mission to make that person smile and make them laugh or something. Same when I'm eating dinner and I got a waiter. Man, I love making a waiter or waitress make. I want them to say, "This is the best table I've had all night." That's what I want, because when you make somebody happy, you make somebody smile, you make somebody laugh, that goes on to the next person they meet and the next person they meet, right? And so there's this ripple effect. And if I were going to be talking about legacy, to me, that's legacy. That's my philanthropy, right? I just want to change somebody's day and have that reverberate for the rest of the day.
You just defined the philanthropic mindset.
Ah, okay.
John, thank you for being on Opening Pathways today. How do we find you?
Oh, you can go to bizzuka.com, bizzuka.com. And you can see me on LinkedIn. I think I'm J.W. Munsell on LinkedIn. And if you are interested in AI, I got a book out called Ingrain AI, which I'm writing a new one. And Tom, I got to figure out how to integrate some of the stuff that we just talked about into that new book. So I might be calling you up and say, Tom,
Yeah,
this could
yeah.
be an interesting
I love it, John. We added another thing to our list of a part two. I think we
there
had
you go.
manifestation and a few things, and we just added regret in there because boy, do I have a lot to say about regret. But
Right.
for today, I want to thank you for being on Opening Pathways. I hope you and your wife have a wonderful time in New Orleans this weekend with some renewal and
Maybe.
what I call the energy of enjoyment. And thank you for being on Opening Pathways today.
Thank you for having me, Tom. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. And to my viewers, this is Tom LeNoble, and I'll see you next time.